Hello, everyone. My name is Kwamia Ross, and today I want to talk about the abuse that Cuyahoga County Children and Family Services continues to cover up. Now, when I first met Pierre, I met him through a chat line. He was 19, I was 21, and I saw some cues that stood out to me then that I really didn't really take a notice of. One of the things that stood out to me was the fact that when I first met Pierre and visited his home, I noticed that he was always wanting me to go into the bathroom with him. Always. And he would ask me to come to the bathroom with him. It's like he was afraid to go to the bathroom by himself. And no one lived at the home but him, his mom, his brother, his younger sister, and the stepfather by the name of Steve. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because abuse, I do know that majority of the time when people abuse others, they themselves were victims of abuse. Abuse kind of runs in cycles. If the person does not get any help or someone doesn't intervene to help that person, they can go on to become the same, predatorial person that, or the same way, because it kind of goes in cycles. These are, generational spirits that prey on other people. It preys on the family, generational curses that need to be broken. So if you don't get any type of help, then you yourself can become a predator if you are a victim of abuse. So I'm going to go ahead and explain some things that happened to my children. And first, I had to talk about some things that I noticed with Pierre when I first met him. Now, when I first went to his house, like I said, he would always ask me to go to the bathroom with him. I thought it was odd because I didn't understand why a grown man wanted me to go into the bathroom with him. And it's like I would go, I would oblige some of the time. I would go in there and I would just sit there, or while he's sitting on the toilet, he would talk to me and he would use the bathroom. And this happened quite a few times, and sometimes I would just deny it. I'm like, just go to the bathroom. Why do you need me to go to the bathroom? I just didn't understand why he wanted me to go to the bathroom with him. So the few times I didn't go to the bathroom with him, I noticed every time he go in the bathroom, a few moments later, his stepfather would knock on the door, and he called him Ray Ray. That was his nickname. Everyone called him Ray Ray. He would knock on the door and say, Ray Ray, let me in. So he would open the door and let him in. And I just sitting here watching all this. I didn't understand at the time what was going on, and I thought it was odd. Like, why is your stepfather in the bathroom with you? You're a grown 19-year-old man. Didn't make any sense, and I didn't know what was going on. But I noticed that he seemed kind of intimidated, this man, and it just seemed that way. Now, one of the things that I did know when I was with him, sometimes we would play alone, we would play around, and I would try to grab on his butt or whatever. You're just playing around in the bed, and he would just jump like, oh no, don't touch me there. So then I that was another thing that, like, okay, that's kind of odd, whatever. So like I said, we were young. I was 21, he was 19. Now, we did drink quite a few times. I was the type of person who could not hold liquor very well. But at that time when I did drink, I don't drink anymore. I've been stopped drinking, but I did used to drink with him, and this was before I had my kids or anything. Cherish and Desmond weren't born yet, so I was drinking with him. A couple times we'd be together. I would drink, and I would only take one or two. It didn't take long. I didn't have much to drink, and I would get drunk right away. And so one of those times they had to carry me into the bedroom, and I was lying on the bed, and I was just, kind of out of it. But I recall one day this happened one night. I woke up, and Pierre was on top of me. He was actually lying on top of me. And that was odd. I'm looking at him like, what are you doing on top of me? I'm asleep out of it. And he was just lying on top of me, fully clothed, but just lying on top of me. Like, how, I don't know if you would just lie on top of someone. And so that kind of stood out. It was odd. I didn't say anything else about the situation. I kind of looked at him. He got off of me, and then I went back to sleep because I was kind of, like I said, I was intoxicated. So fast forward, we were on this time. I was young. I didn't have a car or anything. We were on the bus one day, and we were going somewhere, and I remember Pierre was having a conversation with another gentleman, saying to them, they were talking about jail for some reason. I don't know why jail came up in the subject, but somehow these two were talking about jail. And so he would say, I couldn't be in jail and go without sex or whatever. I'm going to have to take it from someone. If I was there, I would take it, meaning he would, I guess, insinuate that he would rape another person to have sex with them if he had to go in prison for a long time and, So the young man who was sitting next to him, they were having this conversation. When he says, "Well, that shows that's where your mind state is right there. For you to think of that, you had been thinking about this already." And that was the end of the conversation. So I realized these cues were standing out, and I don't know why the cues were standing out, because God was trying to show me something then, but I ignored all this stuff and I continued to proceed with the relationship with him. So fast forward to around 2004, close to 2005. After I'd had my daughter, I'd gotten a low income house. I moved out of my mom's home. I got my first home for the first time. It was a low income housing. It was awful, through CMHA. I knew nothing about CMHA. Um, I didn't know. I just thought that, hey, they're giving us low income housing. They're going to help me get a home. And I was happy. I was working and I could pay my bills and the rent was cheap. And so I moved in. And I was, like I said, it was a horrible place to live. Throughout my time there, I was seeing people getting shot and other things that I did not want that around my children. Now, my daughter was very young. She was like a baby at the time. Cherish was very young. She was a few months old, like several months old. And I was working out in Solon at Marriott Worldwide Reservation Center, where I was just taking phone calls and scheduling hotel reservations for the clients who call in. And I just felt uneasy about the whole situation. I just got an instinct. And, instinct is God's way. He put instinct inside of everyone. It's his way to warn us when there's dangerous situations, or to warn us of any type of trouble that's arising. To give you an example, I was on the freeway driving one day, and all of a sudden I just felt like I need to move over to the next lane. I just felt this instinct to move over, like something wasn't right. So I followed my instinct, thank God, and moved over to this next lane. And not long after that, probably several seconds later, all the other cars just kind of stopped, and one yank, they were swerving out of the lane, and I saw this huge like trampoline and plants and everything all in the middle of the road. It must have fallen off someone's vehicle, and had I stayed in that lane, I could have had an accident. So that's how instinct works. And so my instinct was telling me something was not right. So while I was at work, Pierre was watching his daughter, and I would call the house every day, every time I was on my break, because I felt just I did not feel good. I had an uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. And so I would call and say and check on her, even though I couldn't talk to her because she was a baby. She's like 10 months old. She couldn't really speak. And I would just ask him how she's doing and everything. And he, we wouldn't talk long. I asked if she'd eaten and everything, if he fed her and changed her and stuff. And sometimes when I would call, the phone would just keep ringing and no one would answer. And we're in a one small bedroom, one level apartment. And I'm like, it's plenty of time to get to the phone. Why is it taking so long to answer the phone? And he said, well, he was either, watching TV, or he was asleep, or he was changing my daughter's diaper. It was always some different excuse. So we left it at that. I started noticing that she would take her stuffed animals. She was very young. She wasn't even a year old. She's about 10 months. She would take her stuffed animals and she would kind of like hump on them and do certain things. It seemed like, something that you wouldn't expect a 1-year-old or 10-month-old to do. Not only that, when I was changing her diaper one day, I noticed that her genitals were red. And it wasn't a diaper rash. I knew what a diaper rash was. And this was not a diaper rash. So I took her to our pediatrician, which she'd been seeing since she was a baby. This was Jackie Tricomi, who now I think goes by, well, it was Jackie Carmen at the time, but her married name, she had gotten married while we were still with her and changed her name to Jackie Tricomi. Now, she worked out of the Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital through University Hospitals of Cleveland. So I went to her one day and I took my daughter in and I said, you know what, could you tell if my daughter had been sexually abused? I told her I suspected that she was sexually abused. And Jackie kind of looked at me like in shock for a moment. And then she said, no, she couldn't do that. And then after a few moments, she kind of changed her mind and said, well, let me take a look at her. So I took my daughter's diaper off and we laid her on the examination table. And she checked my daughter and she told me at the time that her hymen was still intact and that she didn't see anything. So I was a little bit relieved. But however, as we went on, I still felt uneasy. So what I started doing was I took my daughter to my mom's house. And she kept my daughter for me. She wasn't working at the time, so she was keeping my daughter for me throughout the weekend. Throughout the week when I did not have to work, my daughter would spend the night over there. I would pack her clothes and everything she needed. My daughter would keep her, and then I would go and get my daughter and bring her home around the weekend and just spend time with her, have her back at the house with me where I was there. That's how we started doing things until finally something happened. There was some type of shootout at this home. I think it was Lakeview Terrace Estates, and there was a shootout above me. And thankfully, my daughter was not there at that time, but there was someone, I don't know, some instances with the neighbors where someone had gotten shot and killed right above me. So I took all of my things and moved out right away. I moved out of this place, went back home with my mom. I was pregnant. I found out I was pregnant with my son. So, Pierre would come by to my mom's house and visit with his daughter. He would go with me to the doctor's appointments. He's very good at that. He would always come to the appointments and things like that. Okay, so that was good. He was around in the picture and everything. And I still did not feel comfortable, so I never left him alone with his daughter after that. I did not leave him alone while he was at the house with my mom. We were always around him when he was with my daughter because I felt uneasy. And so this lasted for a while until, after I had my kid, we kind of broke up for a while. When I had my son, we broke up. I don't know. We got into an argument, and it seemed like he did not want to be around. He wasn't as excited about the second pregnancy like he was with my daughter. Like when I had my daughter, he was very excited. When it came time to my son being born, it's like his demeanor had changed. Like he really didn't want anything to do with it. He left me alone. When I first had my son, he was only about a week old, and I recall his stepbrother, whatever, had to come to the home and go to the store for me because I didn't want to go to the store. And he would get bottles of milk for us and things like that. So Pierre was out of the picture quite a bit while my son was first born. I don't think he came back around to about a few months after my son was born. He came back into the picture and he wanted to be involved with the son and he wanted to see his daughter and all these things. And, like I said, the feeling was there, but it wasn't as it was before. I kind of felt like, okay, maybe he isn't really doing anything. I tried to just, put the feelings aside and I allowed him to have a relationship with his children. So I moved out of my mom's home. We got another house. I moved into Richmond Heights at a place called Loganberry Ridge Apartments. And my children were very young. My daughter, she had to be about 2 years old. And my son was a baby. And I have a picture here. My daughter was very protective of her brother. She had seen some things, witnessed some things. She was very protective. And if you could see it in the picture, I'm going to post her. She's standing next to her brother in this picture. She has her fist balled up. And that will always stand out to me. It's like she felt very defensive when she was around him. And at the time, my daughter really could not speak. She could not talk. She had a disability. And she could only say like one word at a time or phrases. She could never put together coherent sentences. So she could not talk about the abuses or anything that was going on. So I put my children into daycare because I didn't really want their father to be watching them. But, they were going to kindercare. We put them in kindercare. I'd gotten a new job. I put them in kindercare for them to be looked after. And since my daughter, she had a difficult time. My son was a baby, but my daughter, she really did not adjust well to daycare. With her disability, I always felt that she had autism, was on the autistic spectrum, but they diagnosed her with some other things. And I always saw that she just was withdrawn. She didn't really talk to other children. She didn't like them around. She hated a lot of noise, and she just did not, adjust well at all to the daycare setting. I would go there sometimes. I remember one time I went to pick my daughter up from daycare. One of the staff who was there said, "Oh, thank God," or some young man, and says, "Thank God." And it kind of stood out to me. I was a little offended by it. I wanted to say, "What do you mean, thank God? What is there a problem with my daughter?" But I just looked at him, and then I was like, "How is she doing?" And he, they were always telling me that she had difficulties. She didn't want to play with the kids, or sometimes she was crying. And so, I saw that this was just becoming problematic for my daughter. So I made a decision to take her out of daycare. I asked the father, could he watch them, which was a big mistake on my part. I allowed Pierre to look after them once again. This time he was at the home. He was looking after my daughter. He was looking after my son. And I would go to work. And when I come home, I would see Pierre just sitting on a couch, watching TV or either on the computer, looking at YouTube. And my children would be running around with their diaper. Cherish was a toddler with a diaper on. My son was about 1 year old at the time. And they both would have their diaper on. None of them had been dressed or they hadn't eaten anything. I would have to get them cleaned up, get them dressed really quick and feed them and take them out to the playground because they'd been in the house all day. And so a lot of this was going on. And it seemed like he was in some type of stupor or catatonic state that, he had a childlike mind. All he wanted to do was watch YouTube videos and other things. So yeah, I said, this can't go on. And I started noticing things that started standing out to me. Things I started noticing, like my daughter with stuffed animals. She was doing this back at the other house. My daughter would take stuffed animals and start trying to hump them. My son was putting on high heel shoes. At first I thought it was cute and funny. This little boy wants to put on high heel shoes and be like his mom. I thought that at first. Then it just didn't seem right. He was putting on my lipstick. He was starting to bang his head on the walls. He was constantly banging his head on the wall, and we had to put a helmet on him because I tell the doctor about it, and she said, "Okay, we wanted to make sure he was okay." Because I said, I want to make sure he's not getting hurt. He's banging his head on the walls. What's going on? So I started putting a helmet on his head so, he wouldn't hurt himself. And he would dig in his diaper, wipe feces on the wall. And one thing that really stood out to me was when I would give my son baths. I used to bathe him in his little tub, and I would wash him clean. I would wash his genitals, wash everything. He'd be fine. All of a sudden, he started squeezing his legs together so tight, like a vice grip, that I couldn't separate his legs to wash his genitals. And then I noticed something that's not right at all. So all this stuff was going on, and I asked Pierre many times, "Did you do something to my kids? I mean, I don't feel right. Are you abusing my kids?" And he would always say no. He would always deny it. So I'm like, okay, fine. I didn't really have any proof. I didn't know what to do. I was stuck in this situation. My kids couldn't talk, and it's like I didn't know what to do. But I was looking at their behaviors. Certain things, like I said, was standing out. All these cues, all these different, things that were going on. So the one night when I really, really noticed, when my son came to me, he had a popsicle in his hand, and he took the popsicle and he started making these like sexual innuendos with the popsicle. It's like he's performing fellatio. And I looked at it, I'm like, where did my son learn this behavior? Now, my father was there too at the time because he had moved in with me. He was homeless. It was around the winter months, and I felt sorry for him, so I allowed him to come in and stay in my home. So if anyone knows, there was a history also with him, with my father, who used to do things. He introduced me to pornography when I was a 5-year-old girl, and he would touch me and do stuff, and a lot of stuff happened with that as well. So I honestly, at this time, I didn't really know what was going on. I'm asking him questions of why is this going on? Why is my son have this popsicle? And it looks like he's performing fellatio. Where did my son learn this behavior? So Pierre, everybody denies that they don't know what's going on. Pierre said, I asked him again, did you abuse my children? Are you abusing my children? He said no, he denied it. So I just didn't feel right. I was having problems on the job, and I was concerned about my kid. I just ended up quitting my job. I told him, I said, you know what? I don't feel comfortable with you around my kids anymore. We got into this huge argument and everything. He ended up leaving. Now, he did come back. I think it was probably about several months later, I allowed him to come back to see his children one last time. And I noticed my son had wrapped his arms around his neck and was trying to kiss him on the mouth. And he kind of turned his head away. Pierre turned his head. And I was watching all this stuff. And I still felt uneasy around him. So I said, you know what? I don't want you around my kids because I believe you abused them. If you come back, I'm going to report you. So the thing is, Pierre didn't put up any arguments. He didn't say anything. He left. He did not come back around. And my thing is, if you say you didn't do this, or a person, Children and Family Services says it was never proven, why would a man who did not hurt his kids, love his kids, had a relationship with his kids, just willingly walk away for 10 years and not put up a fight, not try to see him or anything? They say that he gave the excuse that he went to California and he was lost touch with us. That's not true. The thing is, he did go to California, but that happened years prior to us breaking up. He went to California. We was only there for a few weeks. I remember when he told me he was going to go down there and get a job. He was there for like 3 weeks and had to come right back because it did not work out. So his aunt had to pay for a bus ticket for him to come back home. So yeah, he came home, and the thing is, the abuse and all the stuff started coming to surface. And I told him myself, if you come back around, I'm going to report you. Now, I did not go to the police right away because, for one, my daughter could not speak very well. Two, I wanted to wait until they were ready to talk about the trauma. Every time I would mention anything about Pierre, my son would have these negative reactions. And I did contact the Richmond Heights Police Department. When I got evidence that Children and Family Services and the Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court systems were trying to involve Pierre Davis in my children's lives, and there was a possibility that he would get custody, I fled. I ran to the police department to get them to investigate. It might have been a lot later than it should have been, but I did tell them about it, and I filed a police report. I was told by the Richmond Heights Police Department that a detective would investigate the case and would speak to my children, and no one has done so. No one has investigated or done anything. So, like I said, those who are covering up in this situation, you're going to be accountable to God at the end of the day. You might not be accountable for the police force that you work for. You might not be accountable for the Children and Family Services organization that you work for, or the government who's over you, but God is the one who you need to fear. My daughter, even though she wasn't able to talk, we knew there was abuse going on. I took her to Beachbrook where she got therapy. That was the first place she got therapy because of the trauma. It affected her a lot. And so she had these dolls because I told her therapist at the time, I said, you know what, I suspect that my daughter has been sexually abused. And I said, could you help me prosecute the father? And so she gave my daughter some dolls, and my daughter would act out with these dolls. And Bonnie said that there was evidence that my daughter had been sexually abused because of how she performed with these dolls. But she said the only thing at that time was that, you know, they couldn't prove that it was Pierre who's doing the abuse because, you know, she couldn't talk. All she could do was say one word at a time. This is why I was able to get away with this stuff. Now, I went to place after place. We went to therapists, went to Center for Families and Children, where my kids were with a therapist by the name of Phyllis Scott. And we would always talk about the abuse. If Desmond heard anything about, like I said, if we mentioned the abuse to him, he would get very angry. And that's why I couldn't bring it forth. So I wanted to wait till my children were comfortable to discuss and speak about it. But I did always notify everyone, even the schools we went to. They always asked, was the father involved, or could the father be added to the list to pick them up, or come by and pick them up if they needed to? I said, no, he abused his children. So the fact that Becky Sawyer says that the abuse was alleged and they have no proof, to me, I feel that they actually do know that this happened. Now, I told Toretta Stores when she first took my kids out of the house, when they first took my kids, she said she's going to contact the biological father. I said no, because he abused his children. He has been around for over 10 years. I kept them away because he sexually abused them. She says it's their protocol, Children and Family Services protocol, to contact all the parents involved. So that means if a father or a parent is abusive or sometimes is in jeopardy of harming their children, the children are in jeopardy of being around them, they still have to contact them because that's the parent. Not only that, it's like they contacted this man, and he had a long stream of felonies and criminal records as well. And so you knew all of this, and you still proceeded to initiate contact with my children. Now, to go back to Becky Sawyer's, she said that there was no proof. I asked her why she didn't bring up any of the abuse in court, and this is the thing I have a problem with. Children and Family Services never said anything about children's court. This is how many kids get placed into abusive situations, because no one speaks up. She knew that there was allegations of abuse. I told her at the time, yes, I did not file right away, which was my fault. I should have filed right away about the sexual abuse, but I was looking out for my children. Would they be comfortable being on trial or going through all this again and revisiting all the information? Because my daughter knew what was happening. She told me after she was able to speak and she got older, she remembered all the things he had done to her, and she started hating him for it. She started hating him. She told me that she would see, sometimes she would go in the bedroom and she would see my son crying while his father, Pierre, was lying on top of him. My daughter had witnessed, she was old enough to see all that. She was like, at that time, she was about 3 or 4 years old. My son was 3 by the time Pierre left our lives. But when this abuse was going on, my son was very young. He was a baby and a year old. And so she would tell me things like she would see him pull his pants down and gyrate, or just like her form where she said it was humping the wall. To me, it's like he's gyrating the wall and he's doing all these things in front of her, in front of them. And so when Becky says there was no proof of these sexual abuses, I'm going to tell you right now that was a blatant lie that she told in court, because she herself knew. She had instinct to know something was wrong, because when Pierre first called into court, my kids, none of us knew anything. He had no involvement with us all this time until, I guess, Toretta Stores, Children and Family Services, and the juvenile court contacted him and told him about the case. He called in on February, the day of our hearing that we had back in February. It was a telephone hearing. We were all on the phone. No one knew Pierre was going to be there, but he called in and spoke his name, and all of a sudden it had an adverse effect on my daughter. Now, Teresa Williams, being the parent that I spoke out about all the things I had with my issues with her and how she was treating my daughter, one thing I will say and commend her on is the fact that she did speak up and advocate for my daughter that day. She told Children and Family Services, Becky Sawyer, Rosalind Bailey, all these people, Amanda Clark, they were all sitting at the table when she spoke to them during a staffing meeting and told everyone that my daughter, after hearing Pierre's voice over the phone for just those few moments, she had a very negative reaction. After that day, after she got off the phone, she went into her room and closed the door and would not come out the entire day because she was upset over hearing Pierre's voice. And she was very concerned and worried about it. So yes, Becky knew that. And this is one of the reasons why she did not set up FaceTime visitations with my daughter and Pierre, but she did it with my son. I was trying to ask that question in court to prove that she knew about the abuse, but the magistrate stopped me from asking that question. If you go back and look at the child custody hearing case, that video that I put up, I asked the question. I was prepared to ask to Becky, because she keeps saying, oh, there was no, it wasn't proven that there was abuse, but you knew yourself that something happened. Why would a child have a negative adverse reaction to someone's voice if there hadn't been any type of past trauma? And the fact that you decided not to set up visitation with him means that you knew something happened. You did not set up and schedule FaceTime visitations or any type of initiating any type of contact with Pierre and my daughter. She told me herself that when she talked to Pierre, she told him that when he asked about his daughter to speak with her, she told him at that time he could not. So ask Becky Sawyers and the rest of Children and Family Services, why would you prevent Pierre from talking to his daughter, but you allow Pierre to talk to his son? Meaning you initiated contact with my son knowing that there was a possibility that he did do this to his children, that he did sexually assault his children. And just another side note that a lot of these caseworkers and therapists, all these people, these are professionals who take extensive classes and lots of studies. They have a lot of information on how children react in certain situations. They take a lot of psychology courses. So one thing I want to bring out as more proven evidence of my daughter's abuse is the fact that she does not go by her name. My daughter has been named Cherish Ross, and she has come up with numerous nicknames ever since she was a small girl. She has not wanted to go by her name. She's called herself Chuck Red. She's called herself Becky. She's called herself Oh Yeah. She's called herself SpongeBob. Everything but Cherish. When you call her Cherish, she hates it because she associates Cherish with that little girl who was abused. She has been made to feel and think that she, as for some reason, caused the abuse. I tried everything to talk to my child to make her feel special and loved and to tell her that she is not responsible for the abuse that happened to her. So for anyone to sit here and say that that did not happen, this abuse, everyone knows. Ask everyone on my daughter's team. They all know that she goes by Becky. Ask why she does not want to be called Cherish. When a child has been abused, they're ashamed of it. So anything that reminds her of that shame, she wants to disassociate herself from it. So this is further evidence that shows you that Children and Family Services was well aware of this abuse, and they have not done anything to help my kids. Instead, they tried to initiate a context and situation and put an abusive man around my children. And this is something that they need to be exposed for and investigated for. Everyone on my daughter's team and everyone on my son's team, everyone involved with this court case needs to be investigated. Now, what I want to say here is that I'm not some bitter baby mother or a bitter mom who's upset at the baby father or the father of her children. That is nothing like that situation. What I will say is Pierre Davis could have been a good man. I believe that he has a good heart and he could have been a good man had he not been abused. I suspect that he has been sexually abused himself. I don't know if that's proof. I don't know if there's proof that this has gone on. But what I'll say here is there were many things that stood out to me. Like I said, when I walked into his home and he wanted me to go to the bathroom with him, and how he was always afraid to go to the bathroom alone, and how every time if I did not go in that bathroom with him, his stepfather would ask to come in there and he would open the door. How he felt intimidated around this man. How I saw his own mother would sit there all day, even though they had a teenage daughter. She would sit there all day and would not cook food, and the girl would go out the refrigerator saying she's hungry, and I would not see the mother cook a thing until 11 o'clock at night and fried chicken and have this girl starving all day. I don't know if Pierre Davis was abused by anyone, but like I said, it was evidence there. I remember one time when my daughter was first born, a few months after she was first born, I allowed her, because the mom wanted to see her granddaughter, I allowed Pierre to come and get my daughter Cherish and take her to his mom's house where he lived with his mom, his his brother, his biological brother, his sister, and his stepfather. I allowed him to take her over there for the weekend. I packed plenty of bottles to make sure my daughter had enough to eat. I packed about 8 or 9 bottles, about 9 bottles of milk for her. I had all these things there. I had plenty of diapers for her. They would send her home after that 2 to 3 day weekend, which is 6 bottles, meaning she'd only gone through 2 bottles. And I would contact the mother and I said, well, why haven't you been feeding my daughter? My daughter had been very light, like she had lost a lot of weight. The mother would say, oh, she fed her. But how does a child only go through 2 bottles in a 2-3 day weekend? To me, there was signs of abuse there. So I feel like if Pierre did do something, and I have a lot of evidence that says that he did do these things to my children, then it might have happened to him also. And he could have been a victim of abuse that it turned around now. It cycles around to him now being an abuser himself. And if that did happen, people failed him. Where were the therapists in his life, the doctors, the teachers who were around him? I'm quite sure there were certain signs that were evident that people could have looked at to save this boy at this time. Like I said, he told me about things that he had done in school, certain adverse behavior that he had while he was in school. And there were signs there. There were signs of abuse. So what I want to do, the system might have failed him, but I don't want the system to fail my children. I don't want the system to fail Desmond Ross and Cherish Ross, because these are my children. And I love my children, both of them, and I'm fighting and advocating for them. The fact that all these people can be responsible sitting up here in the courtroom and would not say a thing. See, here's the thing. When abuse goes on, People think that they don't have an obligation because, oh, if you don't serve God, you don't have to do the right thing. Oh, that's not true. God says the children are the greatest in his kingdom. And those of you, whether you are saved or not, or whether you believe in God or born again or not, when you take these positions and you're supposed to be in a position of authority to protect children, and you know there's things going on and you fail to speak out, whether you're witnessed it by staff in a group home, whether you are a caseworker, a child county caseworker, whether you are a judge or a guardian ad litem or a CASA or an attorney or a prosecutor, if you know there are signs and evidences of abuse and you don't do what's right to protect these children, and you allow children to go forth into abusive environments and be harmed and abused, then you're going to be accountable to God. He's going to hold every last one of you accountable. And whether you're saved or not, we are all responsible. It goes like this. Even if you're not from a certain country, if you're just visiting there, the moment you step feet on those grounds, you have to abide by the laws of that country. So you're not exempt from their laws just because, oh, you're not a native of that country, just because you don't live there in that country. The moment you visit that land, you have to abide by their laws. If you commit a crime while you're in that country, they can arrest you. So the thing is, the moment we were brought on this earth, we are all God's children. He created us and put us on this earth. We have to abide by his laws. Whether you believe him or not, whether you accept him as your Lord and Savior, he's going to hold every last one of you accountable. And those who know better will be beaten with more stripes than those who didn't. Those who did not know better will be beaten with few stripes. But at the end of the day, God is going to be judging everyone. So like I said, when you take these positions and you're in the juvenile court systems, and you're whether you're a teacher or something, you are now accountable for the children. So that's something that people fail to realize. God holds you accountable. This is a serious position to be in when you're responsible for children and you're responsible for the safety of a child, and you sit here and allow abuse to go forth and you don't speak up and say anything. You try to cover it up. God is going to deal with every last one of you. It is better to fear God than to fear man. That's what the Bible says. So those of you who are acting out of cowardice, whether you're afraid or not, when God comes to judge, he doesn't want to hear it. That's not going to be a justification for why you did not do what was right. Now, this is all I want to say. Thank you.